Hello and welcome to The Natural View. I'm Maggie Jaqua. I'm the content director of WholeFoods Magazine, and I'm here with Todd Pauli of 24 Stories Marketing. Hi, Todd.
Maggie, how are you?
I'm good. We have a special guest today. We have Marie Chevrier. She is the founder and CEO of Sampler. Hi, Marie.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Great to have you here. So today we're going to touch on digital sampling. And this is about so much more than just getting a product into consumers' hands, right? It's a tool that can help you reach your highest value consumers. It can help you capture first-party consumer data. It's going to help you grow your email database for marketing, collect ratings and reviews, which we know are so important to help drive sales, and boost digital ad effectiveness. So a whole lot of benefits that you can get from this. So we want to talk about all of that. But first, let's just start at the beginning. I wanted to ask you, you've been in business for, I think, a little over 7 years now, right? And, demand has just been growing with this changing retail landscape that we're in. So can you tell us kind of about the story of Sampler and how you got started?
For sure. So back in 2013, I came up with the concept of digitizing product sampling. And really what was kind of my aha moment was multiple years before, I think something like 10 years before that, I was a brand ambassador handing out free product samples in grocery stores and traditionally at events. And I always thought that it was a little crazy that we were giving out a product sample to someone walking by and they were just walking away, and we were completely not capturing who they were and how they actually what they thought about our product. And for me, that seemed a little ludicrous, especially in a digital world where everything is measured. So I really started with that vision of challenging the status quo as it relates to that industry. And over the last year, obviously with the pandemic, as you were saying, Maggie, we've definitely seen the shift happen. I think brands are finally realizing that, first off, digital sampling or direct to home product sampling is a really good solution for delivering experiences in the safety and comfort of someone's home, but also has the benefits of data capture and everything that you mentioned earlier. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you start to bring sampling into the digital world in terms of, you've got all the advantages of metrics, but it shines a light on how crazy it is to hand a sample to someone. You have no idea if they're interested, no idea if they're the target, not to mention the people that will come up and ask for, 3 or 4 just because. So you're really connecting data and metrics to a very traditional type of sampling process. And I'm kind of wondering, as you have rolled this out over the last several years, what have retailers said about it once they start to see that data plugged in?
Yeah. So our primary client has typically been brands. So the brands would work with us, and as far as what they're seeing, many of them come to us for CRM acquisition, so profile acquisition, right? And so that's one of the big goals. And I'll give you an example. A cosmetic retailer / brand was really looking to build their database. And one of the ways that they do that is with a typical pop-up on their e-commerce website that says, get 10% off if you register with email. Well, by replacing that pop-up with the sampling call to action, they increase conversion to CRM, conversion to email by 7 times. So that's one of the potential things that we can do. Now, some brands don't even have traffic yet at their sites. They're at the beginning. And so they're really trying to get early market feedback, trying to tap into these niche audiences that aren't, the immediate family. And so if they're looking for maybe consumers who shop at Whole Foods, but also have a cat and they want to go into a specific geography, they can also tap into Sampler's owned audience. So it doesn't need to be their audience. And so I think that, what manufacturers, brands have been really most excited about with Sampler is the flexibility of the solution. We have a solution no matter what the goals that you're trying to do are. The most important thing is we in all cases deliver products directly to the consumer's home and connect with them digitally first.
Yeah, excellent. I know you touched on how it's mostly for brands, but one of the things we did a webinar, Whole Foods hosted a webinar with Sampler a few months ago. And one of the things that we touched on that some people who maybe haven't seen that, I want to touch on that here because we've got a really wide audience watching us, right? We have suppliers, we have brokers, we have the retailers, natural products retailers. So one of the things we talked about was that digital sampling, the brands are doing this, but it's not just for brands. There's a bigger picture in terms of benefits for the whole supply chain, right? For the brokers and the retailers as well. Can you touch on that?
Yeah, for sure. So as it relates to retailers, I'm really excited to say that Sampler just recently launched a retailer offering. So we're partnering with some of the largest grocers in the US and department stores in order to launch at-home sampling programs powered by those retailers' Boyle database. So I'm not in liberty of publicly saying those banners yet, but these pilots are happening right now with some really nice banners, and we hope to be rolling out next year fully with all of them, so it could be something that any brand can access. And then the other interesting thing that we did over the pandemic is we connected retail buyers and suppliers in sampling in a B2B sense, right? So obviously we all relied on shows like the Natural Products Expo in order to go and present our products. And unfortunately, with the cancellation of those shows, a lot of people have found it difficult to get, product into mouth when it relates to brand and buyer. And so we partnered with them to do a retailer buyer box, which was a really nice innovation. And how this is scaling now too is in helping the supply chain identify new trends. So we are thinking a lot about, when brands sample on Sampler, it's not just the buyer's feedback that matters, but we can also bring our entire audience's feedback back to the buyer and say, you know what, this product performed really well in Southern California, and it's projected to actually be a great replacement for potentially what is like the category leader right now in that category. And so it's that level of insight that I get excited for the future. And we have some fun partnerships that will be announced soon on how we're going to be leveraging that data from a broker standpoint.
I also love how you have really customizable options, right? So you've got some huge clients, right, like Unilever, but you also really work with some of the smaller brands and emerging brands, so they can really customize their digital sampling program, right?
Correct. Yeah. So emerging brands is actually where we started. 7 years ago, most of the innovation in market as it relates to new products was happening from these emerging brands. And so it made sense to really focus there because they had new stories to tell. They really had, like, consumers wanted to learn about these new trends. So that's where we started. And so it's always been a big part of our core. In fact, 75% of logos on our platforms would be coined emerging or mid-market. So it's actually a large part of our business. And I think the best thing, the biggest thing that people think is that they need to come with like large amounts of budget to the platform, but we've actually created some really great introductory offers for people with smaller test budgets to start testing quickly. And the reality is your first sample will give you data, right? So it's always something that you can always see as quick value realization.
Yeah, one other question I have about the data end of this. I think a big challenge for brands is, when there is more data available, they're not necessarily set up to intake that data and make actionable items out of that, even though that's everyone's intent and everyone knows they need to do this. It's hard, if you have a marketing team, it's hard to kind of turn the ship a little bit. And I'm wondering if you guys have, whether it's dashboards or your team advises, how do you help them see? Because I have to imagine long term, the value of them using that data and seeing success is really going to benefit your platform. They're going to keep coming back if they're like, we got this data, we grew our business because of it. So how do you facilitate that process for them?
Yeah, great question. So we do have an analytics dashboard, which every campaign gives access to. The analytics dashboard will actually give you an aggregate view of exactly who you're sampling to. So although you may come to the platform with, wanting to target consumers who are gluten-free and live in Las Vegas, we'll find out way more than just that from them, right? We'll be able to see about their family make. We'll be able to see potentially where they shop, offline. We collect on average 18 data points on first login. So a lot of information. And so we'll put that all into actually key trends. So you'll be able to see that bubble up. So majority of consumers who had a positive experience look like this. Majority of consumers who had a negative experience look like this. And we also have a brand new feature that I'm really excited about called sentiment and topic analysis, which will actually bubble up sentiment and topics. So it allows, it's actually powered by AI to really analyze and understand what exactly people are saying, and organize it in a way that is easy to digest. So absolutely, yeah. And then the more sophisticated brands who do have a CRM, who are investing, can also leverage our integration with its sales CRM as SAP CRM and our global solution in order to integrate directly into their CRMs and then put that into their own dashboards.
Yeah, very cool. That's great. You've thought about the technical back end of that to make it really easy for brands.
Yeah, exactly. And I think just one more point on the data, if I may, is I know that it's difficult. And I know that this year there's so many things that weren't priorities that are now priorities. So I don't expect everyone to be able to fully leverage the data mandate this year. We have other things to worry about. But going into next year, in preparation for 2023, when Google is going to be completely eliminating third-party cookies, I think we can fully agree that gone are the days where a CPG brand can say, let's think about data later. Even if you don't know what to do with the data, you've got to be collecting the data. And we'll give you a pass for this year, but by next year, you better put that on your agenda, or else you'll be in a really, really challenged position as it relates to targeting and retargeting and advertising in general.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk trends. So what are you seeing? So we're moving into 2022. We still don't know what's going on with live events. The retail landscape is still shaky. We just don't know. So what are you seeing on the horizon?
Yeah, so I think that everyone right now is really focused on optimizing their dollars. I think the CPG industry initially was really resilient in the first year of the pandemic. We saw, many actually seeing large uplifts in sales, but unfortunately, those growth rates were halted for many manufacturers. Some had even very unrealistic expectations, thinking that it would continue into this year. So I think people are starting to get bad news for the first time. And so they're being very budget conscious and trying to make more with every dollar. I also think we're seeing a lot of retailer pressures, retailers trying to finance a lot of the investments they had to make last year into e-commerce, into click and collect. And so there's a lot more pressure into shopper marketing programs, which is why Sampler is really leaning into how we can enable shopper marketing in-home sampling programs, because we know that manufacturers are going to be looking for programs that can help their objectives, like solving sampling, but in a retailer context. And so we're really excited about that. And I think that overall, when we talked about ROI and we talked about return on investment and how we can make more with our dollar, we'll be focused more on lower funnel activities. So driving sales, right? So to me, digital product sampling is exactly that. I think traditional sampling is a bit more of an awareness tool. It's a way to kind of widely spread when I think that, digital sampling has the potential of really arming people with something that can convert into sales. So Yeah, I'm excited about that. And then I think, again, like I mentioned this, but the other trend that next year we're all going to have to be focused on is what first-party data, how important first-party data will become in a cookieless world. And so those are kind of the big ones that I'm paying attention to.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just one last question from me as I'm thinking about, we talked about trade shows being challenging this year. Obviously, they're going to come back. And even in the retail environment, I'm wondering, again, from a brand perspective that has so much budget to do sampling every year, and hopefully they can steal from some of their digital budget to kind of do both. And I'm wondering, do you have any just really quick tips for brands who are trying to do both? Because obviously the brick and mortar world exists and will continue to, and you've got these digital components, but do you have tips for making those work together efficiently so they get the most out of both opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a really cool analogy that was shared by the founder of a great brand that I was talking to yesterday, and she mentioned that she advertises on Facebook, but she also advertises on Amazon. And the way that she explained that was that, in media, you advertise on Amazon because it's the closest to the point of purchase. And you advertise on Facebook because it actually allows you to build your own database. You can drive consumers back to your owned and operated channels. And so I think the same way about sampling. I think that obviously you should be doing sampling at point of sale. It is the best way to get a same day purchase. It's going to be the best way to get into, that same day consideration. But I think we can all agree, for having operated them, that those are incredibly hard to scale. They're so hard to scale. They're costly to scale, and they take a lot of operations. So in a world where it's impossible to be in every single store, obviously it makes sense to have a bit of both. What I'll say is that right now I am not convinced that you are going to get a same day purchase from an in-store sampling program, just because consumer is concerned about security. Therefore, you're probably handing out the sample in a closed packet, which is fine, but the consumer will not be consuming it in store, right? So the reality is they're going to be taking it home, and they're going to be potentially remembering to eat it, but they probably won't. So for the short term right now, I would say that I would prioritize in-home sampling, but that as soon as comfort levels and security is back up, a mix of both makes a ton of sense.
Great. Okay. Any key points that we haven't covered? Anything else you want to touch on?
I guess I'll just just reiterate just how product sampling has been just such a valuable channel for brands for such a long time. And I think that that we should just remember that really the feeling of touching, feeling, smelling, tasting a product for the first time is always going to be the best way to sell our products. And the reason why is because I've met, and you've met, so many founders of companies. When they talk about their ingredients or like their products or their packaging, they describe these things like they are like the most incredible things, and they are, right? There's so much great innovation in ingredients happening in packaging, everything. But there is never going to be a better way to sell your product than to get that experience into someone's hands. And I think that we just need to remember that. We need to remember why product sampling has worked so effectively in the past. And it needs a reinvention, but I don't think it means that you should, and I think it would be a mistake to cancel it, right? So it needs a reinvention right now, but it definitely should not be canceled.
Thank you for coming to talk to us and for keeping us up to date on everything Sampler has going on. As I mentioned earlier, we do have the webinar up on WholeFoodsMagazine.com, and there were some really specific questions addressed there about sizes of sample boxes. You can get a lot more information on the various offerings and what brands are doing. So definitely check that out. That's available on demand. And of course, you can follow up with Sampler if you have any questions. I know they would be happy to talk to you. And so thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Todd.
Yeah, thanks. It was a pleasure.